Hey, welcome to Audio listeners. We're all about breaking down the best ideas from great books.
Want to learn from all those amazing books out there, but you just can't find the time?
That's exactly what we do. We pull the key ideas from the best books on growth and motivation.
So you can boost your personal growth, gain powerful knowledge, and find that daily motivation for free.
Here's the cool part. Every book is a complete playlist, so you can learn from start to finish.
So go check out the playlist section. You're going to find something that helps for sure.
And hey, if you like what we're doing, do us a favor and hit that like button.
You're not going to want to miss what's next, so make sure you subscribe for the latest books.
And one last thing, what book should we cover next? Let us know right down in the comments.
All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into a pretty controversial idea from the bestseller Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's the idea that the rich are playing a totally different financial game than the rest of us, especially when it comes to taxes. Let's break down how this supposedly works. Okay, so the book kicks things off with a statement that's, well, it's designed to shock you. We all know the story of Robin Hood, right? The hero who steals from the rich to give to the poor. This book turns that completely on its head and argues that the whole idea of Robin Hood has actually been used against the very people it's supposed to help. So you've got these two totally different ways of looking at the world, right? On one side, there's this noble ideal we're all taught. Taxes are there to create fairness. But then you have the rich dad reality, which says, nope, that's just a fantasy. In the real world, it argues, the tax burden ended up falling right on the shoulders of the middle class. So how did we get here? To really get what's being argued here, we gotta take a quick trip back in time. Because believe it or not, according to the source, income tax wasn't always a thing. Yeah, check this out. Income taxes, both in Britain and here in America, were never meant to be permanent. They were temporary fixes, emergency funds to pay for wars. It actually took decades to make the idea of a permanent income tax something people would accept. And how they sold that idea? Well, that's the really crucial part of this story. And here it is. This was the big selling point. The promise was simple and honestly pretty brilliant. Don't worry, this tax is only for the rich. That was the line that got the poor and the middle class on board, convincing them to vote for something that would eventually become permanent law. Right, but here's the twist. As the book lays out, that promise, well, it had a pretty short shelf life. The rules of the game were about to change, big time. And this quote from the book really nails the problem. Once government got a taste of money, its appetite grew. Once that tax money started flowing in, the government wanted more and more. Pretty soon, just taxing the rich wasn't going to cut it. So you can see this chain reaction, right? It starts with the promise, hey, we're only going to tax the wealthy. But then reality hits. The government needs more cash. And what's the consequence? The tax burden starts to trickle down, hitting the very same middle-class folks who voted for it in the first place. Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. According to the book, the rich didn't just sit back and take it. Nope. They started playing an entirely different game, using what the author calls the biggest secret of the rich. And that secret is the corporation. Now, this isn't some newfangled idea. Think back to the age of sailing ships and exploration. Wealthy people would pool their money into a corporation to fund a risky voyage. Why? Because if the ship sank, they'd only lose the money they put into that specific trip, not their entire fortune. See, it's a legal tool, a shield really, designed to limit your risk. And that idea of a shield is what makes it so powerful when you apply it to taxes. This diagram right here, it's the key to the whole thing. It shows two completely different paths that money can take. Let's break down how it works for most people first. Okay, for most of us, if you're an employee, the flow is super straightforward. Step 1, you earn money. Step 2, the government takes its cut in taxes, usually right off your paycheck. And step 3, you get to spend whatever is left over. Earn, tax, spend. Simple. But, and this is the big but, for someone who owns a corporation, the order is flipped completely on its head. The corporation earns money first. Then it spends money on all of its legitimate business expenses. We're talking salaries, travel, offices, you name it. And only then, after all that spending, does it pay taxes on whatever is left. Think about that. It's earn, spend, and then tax. It's a total game changer. Now, it's super important to understand this point the book makes. This isn't about doing anything illegal. This isn't tax evasion. This is about financial literacy. It's about knowing that different legal structures have different rules and learning how to play the game legally. All right, so let's just do a quick recap of the whole argument here. First, the tax the rich idea was basically the marketing campaign to get income tax passed into law. Second, the government's need for cash ballooned, and the tax burden got shifted onto the middle class. And third, the wealthy adapted. They used the legal tool of a corporation to play by a different set of rules, where they spend before they get taxed. And the book's big takeaway is that understanding this difference, well, that's the core of real financial intelligence. And that leaves us with this final thought, a pretty provocative question, really. If there are two sets of financial rules out there, which set are you playing by? It's a question that's about way more than just taxes. It's about understanding the entire system that shapes our financial lives.
Okay, so what if I told you there's this secret financial rule book that the wealthy use? You know, the one they definitely don't teach you in school. Well, in this explainer, we're going to crack that book wide open.
Seriously, just think about this for a second. Why do we work like 4 to 5 months out of the entire year just for taxes? I mean, when you put it like that, it's a pretty wild question, right? It almost makes you wonder if the whole financial system isn't just a game, but a game that's maybe kind of rigged against the average person.
Well, the answer, believe it or not, lies in a secret the rich have been using for centuries. And we're about to dive into how they legally play on a totally different financial field. And it all started, funnily enough, because of a big tax plan that completely, and I mean completely, backfired.
All right, so this is the great tax backfire. And here's the real puzzle, right? How did a tax system that was supposed to be for the rich end up hitting the middle and lower classes the hardest? Let's break that down.
It all went down in this kind of predictable 4-step cycle. First, you get a really popular idea passed, the whole take from the rich tax. This gives the government a ton of new money. And what happens when you have a ton of new money? Spending goes way up. But pretty soon that's not enough to cover everything, so the government needs more. And that's when the tax starts to creep down, eventually hitting the very same people who voted for it.
But here's the thing, and this is absolutely the key takeaway. The rich don't just sit there and take it. They don't just comply. They react. They've got the money, the power, and frankly, the motivation to change things. So instead of just paying more, they used all their resources and financial smarts to find perfectly legal ways around the new rules. They essentially sidestepped the very tax that was created for them.
And that reaction, well, it created this massive fork in the road. On one side, you have the people who lose out, the uninformed, the folks who just get up every day, go to work, and pay their taxes, no questions asked. But on the other side, that's where you find the financially educated, and they started playing a completely different game. So, should you climb the ladder or should you own it? This choice is really captured perfectly by the conflicting advice you might get from two totally different mindsets. You've got the traditional employee view, which is all about climbing that corporate ladder. And then you have the capitalist view, which just asks a simple question.
Why not just own the ladder? I mean, this says it all, doesn't it? The poor dad advice is, work your way up the corporate ladder. But the rich dad advice? Why not own the ladder? It's such a simple question, but it highlights this huge fundamental difference in mindset between being an employee and being an owner.
And this really gets to the core of it, right? It's all about power. Think about it. If you work for money, you give the power to your employer. If money works for you, you keep the power and control it. And that knowledge, that financial IQ, is your best shield against what the source material calls the biggest bully out there, the tax man.
Okay, so we're talking about this smarter game the rich started playing. How did they do it? What's the secret weapon? Well, it wasn't some crazy complicated new tax dodge. It was actually a powerful and surprisingly simple tool. And that secret weapon is the corporation. Now, the first thing we have to do is get rid of this idea that a corporation is some giant, scary skyscraper. It's not. It's really just a file folder with some legal documents in it. That's it. It's a legal body without a soul, a tool that's accessible to pretty much anyone, not just the mega wealthy. So why is this simple file folder such a secret weapon? Well, it boils down to 3 huge advantages. 1, the income tax rate for a corporation is often way less than for an individual. 2, and this is a big one, you can pay for certain expenses with pre-tax dollars. You get to spend the money before the taxman gets his slice. And 3, it acts like a legal shield, protecting you from lawsuits. Pretty powerful, right?
And that second point about spending pre-tax dollars, well, that leads us to maybe the biggest difference of all in how the rich spend money. Using a corporation literally flips the entire cash flow on its head.
Just look at this cash flow difference. For an employee, it's earn, then pay taxes, then spend what's left over. For a corporation, it's earn,
then spend, and then pay taxes on whatever is left. That one little change in the order of operations, earn, spend, tax, is one of the single biggest legal tax loopholes out there. It's a total game changer.
And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. The author who wrote about all this used this exact principle to escape the rat race. He actually did it himself, setting up his own corporation while he was still an employee at Xerox.
And he had this great way of looking at it. He said, each dollar in my asset column was a great employee working hard to make more employees. What he means is he took his money and put it to work inside his corporation, buying assets. Then those assets bought him a Porsche with before-tax dollars. It was the ultimate proof that this way of thinking actually works in the real world.
But, using a corporation isn't just some one-off trick. It's a really important piece of a much bigger puzzle. It's all part of boosting your overall financial IQ.
So what does that mean? Well, financial IQ really rests on 4 key pillars. First up is accounting, which is just the ability to read and understand the numbers. Second, investing, the science of making money make more money. Third, you gotta understand the markets, supply and demand, the whole shebang. And finally, the law. This is where you learn about the tax advantages and protections that things like corporations give you. You need all 4.
And when you put it all together, the path to wealth looks, well, it looks very different depending on which path you take. For an employee, it's like walking. You'll get there, but it's slow. For a corporation owner, it's like flying. You're just operating on a completely different level.
And this brings us to one last, brilliant defensive strategy. The wealthy have figured out how to use legal structures like corporations and trusts to, get this, control everything, but own nothing. So if someone tries to sue them, their lawyers find out that on paper, they don't actually own their cars, their houses, or their businesses. It's all protected.
So what's the bottom line here? The rich play a different game. It's not about cheating. It's just about knowing the rules. Rules that anyone can learn. So now that you know some of the rules, the big question is, how are you going to play?